Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. Sub-Saharan Africa, Africa Investment Forum. This is a forum being hosted by the African Development Bank. We have a total of 303 transactions on the table for a total of $208.8 billion. And the president of the AFDB, Akin Adesina. The UN Security Council is considering lifting Eritrea sanctions next week after a rapprochement with Ethiopia, although some members want to maintain some diplomatic pressure to ensure a dispute with Djibouti is resolved, diplomats said on Monday. I wrote about this in detail in an article, Indian Ocean and a port race of sorts. Eritrea is very central to that, particularly because it sits on top of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Rwanda, a poster child for development with a dark side, writes the Wall Street Journal, seen from the concrete blocks marking the graves of some 250,000 victims of the 1994 genocide. The glistening skyline in the capital of this East African nation is the most obvious sign of the grand experiment taking place here. Quarter century after the mass slaughter of as much as 15% of its population, Rwanda has been hailed as a homegrown model of African development, and its iron-fisted President Paul Kagame is a favorite at international business conferences such as the WEF. Rwanda's economy has grown at an average of 7.3% a year since 2000, outpacing its bigger mineral-rich neighbors. Leaders of other African nations send officials to study the Rwandan Development Board, where local and foreign investors can set up a company within 6 hours online if desired. Rights groups and a growing number of academics point to a darker side of Rwanda's economic miracle. They say severe political repression, including the detention of hundreds of homeless and other poor Rwandans in rehabilitation centers, have diminished the country's advances. Researchers have questioned whether the economy is actually performing as well as the data says, accusing the government of manipulating poverty and growth statistics, a claim the government denies. At the heart of this debate is what has become of the Rwanda model, free market overhauls prescribed by the IMF and the World Bank, paired with the unforgiving leadership of Mr. Kagame. The main driver of all the transformation process in Rwanda is the leadership. As the finance minister, Rwanda was blessed to have a leader, Kagame, right from the beginning, from the hardest time, 1994 to today. And saying that, it's the president's leadership that's allowed them to get to this point. More women in parliament than any nation, 61% of seats, plastic bags are banned, schools are free and obligatory until the age of 15. But saying big construction projects, including luxury hotels and a $300 million convention center, have led to a spike in government debt, forcing the country to request a $200 million bailout in 2016. Over the past 5 years, 69% of investments went to Kigali, home to just 10% of the population. And that even in official statistics, Rwanda doesn't perform well. Its score in the World Bank's Human Capital Index was the same as the DR Congo. And some 37% of children under 5 are stunted because of malnutrition. He has his fans and his detractors, but you cannot argue with them that there has been significant progress. Economic turmoil is unavoidable in Mnangagwa, Zimbabwe. I called it voodoo economics. Precarious state of the country's economy, a casual social media post or imprudent policy statement by a government official is enough to cause panic among consumers. At the heart of the problem is government overspending. The profligacy of the Mugabe administration has not changed under President Mnangagwa's government. The total budget deficit for the year is expected to surpass $2.3 billion, quite impressive for a country with a tiny national budget of $3.8 billion. Deficit is funded by the issuance of government bonds, primarily treasury bills. government simply doesn't have the money to pay the debts, but a default would render the $8.3 billion worth of treasury bills out there almost valueless, destabilize the entire financial system, and foreclose the bills as a way of raising money by the government. Previously, the government dealt with the problem by printing money, a temporary escape route. The solution now is through the simple expedient of directing the Reserve Bank to make book entries into the credit columns of banks holding maturing treasury bills. In this way, money is created from thin air. And then talking about the RTG, officially the RTGS money is US dollars on a par of 1-to-1 with hard cash. The law of economics say otherwise. Mozambique Eurobond took off yesterday on the news that Mozambique is to share some gas revenue in its tuna bond restructuring. Finance Ministry said the proposed restructuring would see bondholders receive new paper maturing in 2033, with principal repayments beginning in 2029. Creditors would also receive 5% of future fiscal revenues from the Area 1 and Area 4 natural gas projects. The payments from gas revenues would be capped at $500 million a year, but still could be a boon for bondholders. So that's a big development. Looks like an important first step out of its long-running debt sagas of William Jackson. Markets have welcomed the development. Bond rose 3 cents to 88.9 cents, highest level in more than 2 years, but still equates to a yield of 15.2%. Eurobond will have a 5.78% coupon through 2023. 4% will be paid in cash, and the rest will be payable via capitalization. I wrote in June 2014, it was of course it boomed and then it bust, and then I was saying Mozambique could be the next Qatar. This is a photograph I took of Maputo from the sea. And then I must say in July 2016 I recommended people buy this Eurobond because I thought it was very cheap. It was around 35 cents on the dollar. South African all shares down 8.49% this year. Dollar versus Rand, the Rand has rallied close to 14.0498. Egyptian pound 17.929. Nigerian all share down 15.92%. Ghana is opening a commodities bourse to push and lift farmer income. They're going to start with yellow and white corn, soybeans and sorghum. Exchange is forecasting to trade 30,000 to 50,000 tons of fresh produce within the first year. Ghana Stock Exchange is up 5.23% this year. Econet Strive Masiyiwa says if Trump managed to shut down China's ZTE, half the telecoms infrastructure in Africa would have shut down within 60 days. The EU regrets the deterioration of human rights situation in the country and will be conducting a broader review of its relations with Tanzania. Quite a statement, and I see the Tanzanian government's rolling back. I wrote a piece on Monday about the Kenya shilling. I said it's uppermost in most folks' minds. I spoke about key levels from 2011, 105 to 107, and I said I prefer to be long than short. Dangote Cement is in talks to acquire a company with operations in Kenya and Tanzania. This is obviously ARM. Nairobi all share fell sharply yesterday. It's down 16.5% year to date. Safaricom dropped. Look at this. Mobile payment market was valued at 601 billion in 2016, is projected to reach 4.574 trillion by 2023, growing at a CAGR of 33.8%. NSE 20 down 23.44%. I did 2 interviews a while back. One was with Dr. Benson Wairegi of Britain, and another was with George Odo, the senior partner in Africa Invest. Do take a look if you've got a second. Thank you for stopping by.